Okay, terrific. Well, welcome everyone. Good day to everyone who's joining us. I see that the attendees are starting to file in. It's the top of the hour, so we're going to get started. Thanks for spending some time in your day with us. As you are probably aware, you've signed up to listen to an hour webcast, which will be titled 2020 Analytics That Matter. This is a biennial survey that we have done through MESA International, and we sponsor and promote here within MESA and the Analytics Working Group, which I'm a part of. And we do this with our partner LNS Research. So you will see the results of that survey for 2020 today, and there's a lot of interesting insights that we want to share with you in the next hour, and there'll be an opportunity for Q&A at the end. Andrew is in control. Andrew Hughes is in control of the slides. Andrew, can you advance to the next slide, please?
I can try.
Awesome. so we know now that works. Okay, terrific, everyone. So today in this webcast, you'll hear from myself. I am Chris Monchinsky. I have the pleasure of serving as the working group chair for MESA's Analytics Working Group. Analytics Working Group has been the promoter and organizer, we'll say maybe the field general to put this together, but the real work, of course, is being done by everyone who's responding to that survey, and the construction and the organization analysis of all that data coming from the survey, which of course has been done by LNS Research. I also serve I guess in my day life as a vice president with Automated Control Concepts, a systems integration company, and I lead up a pretty spirited and talented engineering team in the arena of manufacturing intelligence. It's kind of right where we are right now with analytics. With me today is Matthew Littlefield, who is the president and principal analyst with LNS Research, and he's going to tell you a little bit about LNS Research and the work that they're doing and how analytics fits into that wider view of today's smart manufacturing world. And Andrew Hughes, who's the principal analyst with LNS Research, who I presented with before, and he's going to give us the core of the survey results and analysis and conclusions that have been drawn to date. Next slide, please. So when participating today, for any of you who have not used a GoToWebinar, okay, you join as a participant. You are in listen-only mode. There is a questions section in your toolbar. You'll see it pictured here. And you can actually type in questions that will go to the moderators and the participants here. Those of us will all see the question, and we will review those questions and try to get as many of them answered as possible at the end of the webinar. If we don't answer your question, or if you need follow-up in the question, please continue to put it into the chat, into the question bar here. And when you do so, we'll capture all that at the end of the webinar, and be sure to follow up with you, post the hour that we have scheduled for today, to make sure you get any questions and concerns and follow-up that you need. Next slide, please. I think there's some animation there, so yeah. So just as I had just said for you, exactly. Presentation is recorded. It will be posted along with the slides as part of MESA's resource library, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So go ahead to that next slide. Excellent. So our agenda today. Again, I'm Chris. I'm going to tell you a little bit about MESA and the Analytics Working Group, and just give you some background on what we've been working on over the last couple of months. Matt, as I introduced before, is going to tell you a little bit about LNS and all the different things that LNS is working on as well, and how that fits in, and they support the Analytics That Matter survey. And then Andrew is going to give us really the core of our presentation today, and we will allot for some time for Q&A at the end. Next slide, please. So you've joined a MESA webinar. As most of you are probably aware, MESA is a nonprofit organization. We've been around for several years. We have membership and meetings and working groups all across the globe. It really, MESA is one of those unique organizations, especially in this, I know everyone uses this euphemism, challenging times that we live in right now, where we can collaborate free from concerns about commercial issues, to talk about all the evolving and changing technologies on our workplace. Manufacturers have never before had so many tools, so many capabilities at their disposal to really leapfrog their capabilities, enhance their capacity, enhance their quality. Do amazing things to really span the globe and engage with their customers. But to use all those technologies and which ones to use and how to put together a solid roadmap for implementing those technologies and how to build an organization to support that new kind of thinking. Well, those are a lot of the challenges that we all face. And MESA is a great place for you to collaborate with your peers, to learn from vendors, learn from solution providers, learn from fellow manufacturers in your space or in other industries as to how they are tackling those challenges, what's important to the general audience, to come to some consensus. We do that, of course, through generalized education and certifications that are built around many of the common and relevant topics today in smart manufacturing and analytics in particular. We do that, of course, through peer groups and our working groups in particular, and we do that through an extensive resource library that we've been, cultivating since 1992. There's quite a few white papers and guidebooks as part of that resource library, in addition to several years of the reports like the one you're going to see today, Analytics That Matter, going all the way back to the early aughts. So you can look at the progression just in those reports of how the industry has evolved and adopted these technologies in the analytics arena. Next slide, please, Andrew. So with regard to peer groups, I had mentioned working groups. The analytics working group, which I chair, is one of many working groups within MESA. Working groups are one of the key ways that MESA as an organization allows everyone who's a MESA participant, and even those who are outside the MESA community at times, to bring ideas to MESA, to discuss ideas comfortably among peers, among industry, either complementary industries or even cross industry to different types of companies, different manufacturers, et cetera, to understand how we're meeting the challenges today of implementing all these new technologies, of really revolutionizing our organizations and driving data into our organizations, making our organizations about the data, reactive to the data. We've heard all these kinds of statements before, but the working groups are great places to collaborate and build content. So again, when I talk about that resource library that MESA has for its members, that resource library is built in many cases by these working groups. And we have a lot of our working groups, including the smart manufacturing working group, including the analytics working group, are built around the common topics of Industry 4.0, digital transformation, smart manufacturing, all these challenges that face us today when we're trying to implement some of these fantastic new technologies in order to really revolutionize our businesses. Next slide, please. So again, I had mentioned that specifically there are several working groups related to smart manufacturing. We have a smart connected factory working group. We have a working group interested in digital thread, digital twin. Our analytics group covers obviously the use of analytics, but also the role of how you implement analytics in a manufacturing environment. How do you build the teams associated with supporting data analytics? What kinds of members need to be involved in those teams? One of the big topics in analytics in particular is, of course, the opportunity to go beyond the four walls of manufacturing and bring in data sources from the supply chain, bring in data sources from your consumers, and get a much larger picture of how an organization is dynamically moving and operating, and how your manufacturing operations fits into that, and how it can be reactive to all the different forces that are leaning in on the organization and challenging the organization. There's a place for lots of different topics and lots of different opportunities for people to collaborate. So if you haven't signed up to some working groups yet, if you're not calling into working group meetings, I know in analytics we have a passionate core group of folks that joins and collaborates regularly. We'd love to have you. I know Smart Manufacturing Working Group has generated a lot of good content over the last couple of years, so they have a really strong membership following. And if you're not involved yet, I encourage you to get involved. It's a great place to just learn more about these topics and where the current present state of the art is and where industry is going in the smart manufacturing landscape. Next slide, please. With regard to peer-reviewed resources, there are quite a library of resources at the disposal of most MESA members. What I will point out is that the analytics working group has been working pretty hard over the last 2 years to revise one of our key deliverables, which we revise on, as you can see in this timeline, on a regular basis, which is our guidebook. So we've had various formats and instantiations of this guidebook over the years. The current version of that, which was released earlier this year, is the Manufacturing Analytics Guidebook 2020. It is a fairly long compendium analysis of the current analytics landscape. It delves into building a team for analytics and how an organization can get collaboration from the various silos or different groups within its organization to make an analytics program effective. It deals with the kinds of analytics that one should look for. It deals a little bit with the technology. The technology is probably one of the more challenging topics to discuss because it's moving so fast. And there are so many different ways to implement analytics programs. There's no one size fits all, and I think that we all recognize that. But I really encourage you to, if you haven't already, take a look at the current Manufacturing Analytics Guidebook, download it, review it, and as we continue to evolve that through other white papers and a revision of this guidebook eventually in the next couple of years, please participate in the analytics group and help us out with that. Next slide, please. And then finally, that's what we're here for today. The working group supports this biennial survey that is constructed and organized and collated by LNS Research. And the idea is to get a pulse on the industry and MESA members and beyond as to their adoption of analytics, their awareness of analytics technologies, where they think the analytics technologies are going to benefit their organization, how are they organizing their companies perhaps differently in order to take advantage of these technologies. And we're going to see some true evolution in the way manufacturers are approaching analytics in this year's survey results from what we did in 2018. Next slide, please. And with that, I want to hand it over to Matt, and Matt's going to give you an introduction to LNS Research and some information about what LNS Research is doing in the wider realm of smart manufacturing and the digital enterprise, and then relate it into the Analytics That Matter survey that we're going to present you today. So Matthew, please.
Thanks, Chris. Great intro. First off, big thanks to the leadership at MESA for continuing to engage with LNS Research and giving us the opportunity to contribute to the MESA community. I've been a member of MESA since 2006. Back in 2014, when Julie Frazier, one of the longtime leaders at MESA, that name I'm sure rings a bell with a lot of folks, asked us to take over and shepherd the metrics work that she started. We were honored, and we hope that this latest contribution lives up to that high standard and keeps the industry moving forward. We do believe that MESA represents the pinnacle of manufacturing technology leaders. There's really not a group of folks out there with more expertise or focus when it comes to manufacturing technology. And of course, thank you to our sponsors, Rockwell Automation, Epicor, and CIA Software ShopView. They share our vision for transforming manufacturing through data, through culture, through what we call industrial transformation. So, next slide, Andrew. I won't spend a lot of time on LNS Research. We're already a number of minutes through here. I want to get to Andrew, but our mission and vision is to evangelize and drive industrial transformation. We do that through research and advisory, focused on people, process, and technology. Next slide, Andrew. So I wanted to start with the idea of industrial transformation. What is industrial transformation? Why do we call it that? We do choose those terms specifically. Digital transformation, one of the big buzzwords of industry today, and we see industrial transformation as an important and distinct subset of the broader digital transformation. We believe that for a number of reasons. Of course, there's the physical nature of asset-intensive operations, the long asset life cycles, the safety concerns, a number of reasons why transforming digitally manufacturing operations is very different than many other industries. And then another important piece, if you go back a few years ago, the industrial IoT was a big buzzword and a big trend, the connection of many devices that previously had not been connected. Again, that's a subset of a broader IoT trend, but it is important to point out, I believe, that the industrial IoT is not representative of all that smart manufacturing or industrial transformation is. It's an important technology, but it's one of many that drives overall transformation. And then the final piece of why we use the term industrial transformation rather than digital transformation, I believe in the early days, many companies ended up focusing on the tool set as the outcome, right? We go to bed a manufacturing company, we wake up as a software company, and that's not necessarily the best path forward, I don't believe. I think in a lot of cases, it's about using digital tools to drive change. In particular, we'll talk about this today quite a bit, Andrew will, step change improvements rather than or in addition to continuous improvement. And we'll talk through that. Next slide, Andrew. And then I just want to take folks quickly through our industrial transformation framework. This really is the basis of how we think about transforming a business, a manufacturing business. So at the highest level, we have business objectives. So this is typically set by the C-suite and the board. This is entering new markets. This is how to differentiate against competition, growth strategies, cost-cutting strategies, etc. Next comes the strategic initiatives. So this is where a company would focus on something like smart manufacturing, industrial transformation, in alignment to business objectives and then supporting business objectives, and driving change management across people, process, and technology. Next, we talk a lot about operational architecture. So architecture is really the glue. It's the mapping to get from a strategy to a solution. And many companies don't spend adequate time, energy, or resources on architecture. The flip side is also true. It's easy to get caught up in architecture, spend too much time on architecture, and never get to execution. But at the same time, if there is an architecture, the end result can be quite far off where the original intention started. And similarly, this is where some of the big trends, we'll talk about this as well today, around IT/OT convergence are happening, which is both a technology trend as well as an organizational trend. And so getting that common view across traditional OT systems and IT systems is important. And then that flows into solution selection and change management. And so often companies will start at solution selection, or maybe they start at strategy or business objectives and go directly to solution selection, never really considering operational architecture or the management of change. And we have a lot of research on maturity across a number of these areas that shows change management is often the most important part of transformation. And then, of course, there's common challenges and gaps that go across all of these areas, which we see as swim lanes here, and are important pieces of the feedback loops. And then metrics and analytics is at the top of that list. So that's what we'll be focusing on today. And then I do want to end with the idea of why, what, and how on the left. And so as the market has matured around industrial transformation, the early days were very much around why and what. Most people understand that now. They understand the why and the what. The big questions is around the how. How do companies change? And that's where these strategic initiatives come from, which Andrew's showing here. And so industrial transformation and technology strategies have to be integrated into a broader manufacturing strategy that's connected to the larger value chain strategy with an eye towards the customer, but integrating across suppliers and supply chains. So we do see a number of companies, when they talk about smart manufacturing, not capturing the value. So investing in a lot of smart manufacturing technology, but if it doesn't actually change the way a company engages with the customer, right, that value can leak. That value can leak and not be realized. So we see that strategy really needs to touch on people, process, technology, include value chain integration, be tied to those business objectives, incorporate some type of continuous improvement or transformation process, which we visualize there's plan, do, check, act. And then, of course, you need to have those metrics. And whatever they are, typically we see safety, quality, productivity, and cost, but we'll talk through how those may differ. But everything we're going to be talking about today on analytics and metrics is intimately connected to how a company can transform in these very volatile times, stay competitive, and execute on strategy. And with that, I think we're going to Andrew.
I think no.
Oh,
one more.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more. So we'll go through this quick. I do want to get to you. This is our IX reference architecture, industrial transformation reference architecture. And just shows, and we've talked about this quite a bit in previous years, versions of this, how there are a whole new set of emerging technologies that bring about a whole new set of questions. This ties back to that idea of architecture and data. And we believe in taking a use case-based approach to the use of data, a data model-based approach to help companies be more agile in the development of their analytics. And there's a whole ecosystem of vendors and capabilities that need to come together to drive what should hopefully to the user be a very simple experience and almost self-service when it comes to analytics. We could spend a half hour on this slide, but to get to the meat of the presentation, let's move ahead, Andrew.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks, Chris, for your interesting introductions. Now, let's dig a little bit into what we got out of the report and what we've been doing with the Analytics That Matter survey, because it's not, we get a lot of numbers, we get a lot of interesting things we can look at, but if we don't actually use them in intelligent ways, then the effort is somewhat wasted. First, let me look at who takes our survey. We try to ensure that all respondents come from industrial companies from around the world. Surveys translated into 3 languages to attempt to get a balance, but as you see, North America and Europe still strongly dominate. But I think what's interesting is we do get a good balance of different industry types. It's not surprising that the discrete is a little bit ahead of process and batch, because there are a lot of small discrete manufacturing companies out there that are members of ours or read this report. The company size is widespread. A lot of companies in the 50 to 500 million range, and as I said, quite a lot in the smaller range. But if we actually look at all the results, something very interesting happens, and we see that the coverage that we have of the survey, approximately 6,000 plants are covered by the study demographics, and 3.5 million people work in those companies. And what's interesting is that 10% of the respondents have more than 100 plants. So that's a huge contribution towards the 6,000, of course, but shows that there's a lot of people who've been very interested in analytics in big companies and more than just analytics, how to use it. Some of you have seen earlier LNS research on industrial transformation, what we call IX for short. We first defined the concept of IX leaders more than a year ago, and they're defined as being in the top 2 answers of how is IX transformation going. Note that we don't use the answer to have you implemented something, but rather what the perception of success is. This is much more qualitative, but really gets to the point of success when we start to see business benefit and the speed of the program's impact, and then the next level down, which is the majority of the leaders. You know, the corporation is starting to see value. I mean, these a lot of the respondents are technology focused in this survey, but to see these answers come out and the growth of IX leaders from 28% in 2019 to 37% in the first quarter of this year. One of the things that we try to do in our research is to show how good practices benefit the whole company. So we'll use the concept of IX leaders against followers to compare the use of analytics throughout today's webinar. One fundamental to success in analytics and IX transformation, and of course these are very closely tied together, is having the right people available to drive the programs. Two key roles are analytics leadership, managerially and technically. It's important to recognize, and IX leaders do this much more than followers, that IT often has the right skills to manage data from disparate realms. Matt briefly mentioned IT-OT convergence, the convergence of operational and information technology people. This is, continues to be a sticking point for a lot of companies because the trust across the organization isn't necessarily there. There isn't necessarily the belief that data in the plant can actually be very useful to the boardroom if properly presented. And IX leaders are much better at recognizing that IT has the right skills to manage this stuff. And IT has been doing this for 30 years or so, supporting all parts of an enterprise. But when we look at today's requirements for IX transformation, a lot of people find they need new technical leadership to define the next generation of analytical data management. And that's data science. And I think I'll come back to this point later on, but I think data science has got itself a pretty good rap at the moment. The COVID crisis has demonstrated how amazing the capabilities of data scientists are today, and to think that Johns Hopkins University publishes daily global results of where they think the pandemic is quite extraordinary. There's no doubt that they've done a really great job there. So getting the organization together to be able to develop IX leadership is really key, and also involving the OT and the operations people as customers and partners is vital to the success of analytics and industrial transformation. I mentioned COVID, and a quick important aside, the survey was pre-COVID. I'm pretty sure the survey, the numbers that we used, we closed in February. We started taking the survey end of November, early December last year, and I think for the purposes of this report, we closed collection either late in January or in February. So thinking has definitely changed, and we'll see a little bit of that in a minute. When we look at obstacles to growth, the standout for me is the difference between IX leaders and followers in supply chain disruption. This seemed not to be an issue for followers, but I think it would also be interesting to correlate with company size, but that's for another time, because it may be that a lot of the followers are the smaller companies because they can't invest as much. But one thing I think we can be rest assured is that supply chain disruption will become a much more important issue post-COVID as people try and get going again. The second top number in this list, the highest for followers is new competition. And one could ask the followers today what they are doing about coming out of COVID as a market leader. Not everyone's going to win as we grow out of into the new world, but some are, and we already see that today. In order to follow up on the analytics survey and other surveys we've done over the last year or so, we conducted a couple of small surveys in March and June to see how companies were coping and how their transformation, specifically their IX transformation and COVID-19 transformation projects going. And we asked the basic question, you know, are you continuing IX transformation throughout the crisis? Unsurprisingly, some projects have been put on hold. In fact, the number of projects on hold from March to June was increasing, but there are lots of positives within this, with more than half still ongoing or accelerating across the board. EHS is leading the way, not surprisingly, while quality is generally a bit of a laggard. That may be because people work on quality a lot all the time, and it wasn't the top of the list at the moment. It's key to keep focused during COVID, and also worth looking at how you can use the time to upgrade the skills of key technical people. Getting ready for analytics being a great opportunity. Data scientists and data engineers are going to be in short supply and probably high cost as we exit from COVID. So, good employees, good engineers can start to learn more and more about managing data, especially on the OT side, the plant side, and that's really going to help you move out of the COVID world. I'm not saying they can become data scientists overnight. That's a tough job, but certainly if you've got teenage kids, who like a bit of mathematics, now's a good time to teach them about data science and the opportunities for the future.
It's an excellent point that you make, Andrew, that, coming out of COVID, and you made the point about Johns Hopkins, is that the data scientist skill set is not just in demand in manufacturing, but it's in demand across the board in so many different industries that are not even related to perhaps where we are focused right now. So coming out of COVID, it's only going to be even more demand. And as you can see, the XI leadership and those IX leaders, rather, are really the ones who have understood that there needs to be some different team members, different team dynamics, different skill sets that really need to take you to the next level to adopt these technologies and make them effective.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, Chris. I mean, particularly this idea of team dynamics, I think that's something that the IX leaders get much more than the followers. And in fact, that brings me very nicely on to the IX leaders against the rest. How do you measure performance? And if you're an IX leader, you measure performance. The analytics is all about measuring performance and delivering value from that collected information. This list takes us back when this report used to be called Metrics That Matters. This is the second time, so it's 4 years since we last did our Metrics That Matter. And that was all about collecting information and displaying it. But it's the same information in many ways that the IX leaders are still collecting today. There's two exceptions, being workplace injuries and unplanned downtime, both negative measures that they want to get away from. They don't think that those are things that they should have to measure. They should just not exist. But I think that the real takeaway from this for followers wanting to become leaders is measure, measure, measure. If you have useful, clean, and complete information, you're going to be much more set up for transformation and for analytics than if you don't. And that can be seen exactly the same here. I'm going to skip over this quickly because we've got lots to get through and not lots of time. And setting improvement goals is the same right across the board, except for the negative ones. Where were they? Yeah, planned downtime and unplanned downtime. Those are the ones where improvement goals are equal across the board, whereas everything else, the IX leaders are concentrating much more. It's very, very dramatic. This is a slight aside which I wanted to put in the deck because I think it's something that's interesting for people to consider. How do you do data operations, development, the lean manufacturing, and how do you bring all this together into a system that allows you to apply your data analytics across the operations? I'll jump over this because I want to get more into the data ops and the models. The key to metrics was, and the key to analytics is data. And today there is no off-the-shelf solution that's really going to meet all your needs. The important decisions to take now should not restrict your future growth in terms of your data model and your data decision making. But of course, you're going to have to make the growth as and when you can from a technical and a size point of view. This simplified diagram, and we'll see it in much more complex form in the next slide, basically shows a starting point for defining data. We've split it into three categories. You could choose differently. The first on the left being, traditional structured data, which is everywhere in an organization today, from ERP to manufacturing operations management and all sorts of mainstream IT systems. In the middle, what we call time series data, what we sometimes call semi-structured data, and data historians do this rather well. And finally, there's the unstructured data, which is all the newer stuff. I've got some examples in here, but there are lots of others like video, voice, raw text, and so on. And in the long term, it's the capture of value from these categories that will change analytics and industrial transformation. But data is all very well. People are going to want to use it, and it's a little bit more complicated than that. There's lots of things to do with data. And again, this is well worth a more detailed read the picture here as well, because it does bring up some important things. You have to look at the data according to the use case. At the top, the operational and enterprise data lakes. There could be one or two or more data lakes depending on how you want to split it. But basically, those are the main places for cleansed, aggregated, and compacted data, and where the majority of analytics and other users will get their data from. It's a way of offering up data services at different levels of sophistication. With no-code and low-code applications, and many enterprise analytics will be served from these lakes. However, when you look at these yellow lines, they're really important as well. They offer traditional direct access to, for want of a better word, unadulterated data. For example, a design engineer will want access to raw PLM, CAD, and simulation data without it having been compacted and cleansed for the uses of the masses. And so the whole model has to give access to everyone, from supplier to customer, and perhaps in the future consumer and beyond. The uses and users are limited only by your imagination. But it's really important when you're looking at these far-flung ideas of consumers linking into your enterprise data lake. You've got to remember these guys in yellow, who are the traditionalists. Now, something completely different. A new use of the ATM survey for our manufacturing clients. And first, we'll have a quick look at analytics sophistication, and then leaders, as we've already looked at IX leaders, we'll look at the analytics leaders, and then finally at maturity. When we look at the different types of analytics, firstly, we see a new one, prognostic. We've added this since the survey, as we see it becoming an alternative to predictive analytics, especially when we base the prognosis on a few closed variables. such as what is the likely outcome or of a few limited choices. I think that's something interesting and something we'll definitely be following up in the future. But when we look back to 2018, we were very surprised that predictive and prescriptive predictive and diagnostic analytics were pretty much the same, and predictive in fact was slightly ahead of diagnostic and descriptive. We expected descriptive and diagnostic, which is a very traditional view of analytics, of data, of metrics, to be well ahead, whereas in fact predictive was the leader. And we're seeing exactly the same thing this time. And what we're also seeing is a strong move forward from 2018 to 2019 or early 2020. Prescriptive is always going to lag because we need to build trust in the analytics before we can use the output of sophisticated algorithms to change a process or change or give a command to a person to do something. Predictive, diagnostic, descriptive, and to a certain extent prognostic are there to guide and advise. Prescriptive is to tell you what to do. And I was talking earlier about the IT-OT convergence. This is something that's going to have to be a lot of work is going to have to be done on building trust so that the OT guys can say, yes, we can use it. I mean, if you actually look at the continuous process industries, for years they've been using very, very sophisticated algorithms and real-time optimization and advanced process control in areas like that, where they can directly control the process using mathematical-based models. We're not really doing that in the world of discrete manufacturing. So there's a long way to go, but still, this trust is a big issue. Very quickly, we talked about analytics leaders are at 37% now, and I think in my case, yes, I've done this the wrong way around. So the two best answers are at the bottom this time. So the bottom one is saying we are aware and understand and have already seen dramatic impact of analytics. And the other one is interesting because we threw in a customer demands as part of the question. And 12-13% of the respondents are seeing the need for analytics because of their customer demand. And so if we take these two together, we define our analytics leaders as having answered in one of those two categories, and the 23% of our respondents were that. These are not static targets because we expect growth. If you remember the IX leaders, there was only 7% in the top category and 30% in the next category. Maybe we will be moving the category boundaries to say, IX leaders have to really be in the first category. Similarly here, we might, we insist on dramatic impact if you're going to be considered a leader in a year or two's time. So you can't think of this as an achievement. And when we get on to talking about maturity, we'll see exactly the same thing happening. Is moving targets are vital in order for industrial transformation and analytics leadership to improve. Again, no surprise here. Analytics leaders lead. There's little surprise there, except the picture is the same shape. So the analytics followers are following the same sort of path, it seems, that the leaders have already taken. And this is something that we need to keep an eye on. Is how can we help the followers to accelerate along the same path that they're going today? Get predictive analytics wider spread. They're already doing well, but want to get it higher, and then help them build the trust in OT and IT convergence in order to fill that big gap in prescriptive analytics. But analytics aren't much use to anyone unless you can actually use them. most of these improvement goals, again, have been followed since the days of metrics that matter. But we added a lot this year about usage and the timeliness of analytics output and its availability. And this is really the outcome of a lot of the questions that were asked there, is that, what are you actually using analytics for to improve business and manufacturing performance? The analytics leaders, of course, are way ahead, but again, the shape is similar, and a couple of the better forecasts and quality is right at the top for everyone, which is great. And then finally, in looking at some of the data that we took off the sort of directly out of the survey, which roles have access to analyze information from the plant within the time frame necessary to make appropriate decisions? And that time frame is very, very important. One of the bottlenecks to analytics growth is the concept of real time. I need my analytics. I need my metrics in real time. There's no such thing as real time. Everyone's view of real time is different. If you're an engineer designing a control system for a fighter jet's engine, your idea of real time is quite different from a C-level executive who has to give a report once a quarter to his board. And we've got to remember that, because giving information in the correct time frame is so incredibly important. And that's something, again, that IX leaders are well ahead of the followers in doing that. But there are weak areas across the board, and this is something that use of your analytics data clouds, being able to run complex analytic algorithms in order to deliver up data at the right time and in a way that it can be trusted is all about where we're going with industrial transformation and analytics. I just wanted to finish off with a few slides about something that we don't do this research in isolation from the rest of our work. You've heard me and Matt before me talk an awful lot about IX transformation, but there's more than just that. And one of the things that we're doing with our industrial clients is to talk about maturity. How mature are you, and finding an easy way to use the output of the analytics survey to define maturity levels, and then measure companies against how they answer the survey against their peer of 250, 300 respondents that have been on the ATM survey. And we're doing exactly the same on Factor of the Future, stroke manufacturing operations management. We've done it on quality. We're looking at EHS. We've done it on asset performance. So there's a lot of areas in which we can do this. And we use the same model, but of course with completely different data in each case. And so very quickly, we look at a number of best practices, which are basically some of the answers from the survey, and see how many respondents said yes, we've done that, and then spread it out on a bar chart and cut it into quintiles so that 1/5 of the respondents are in each of the levels 1 to 5. Unsurprisingly, level 1 is quite tightly down towards 6 and below. If you haven't answered 6 of the 60-odd measures in the positive, you've got a long way to go in your industrial transformation program. But it's very clear that going from level 1 to level 3 is a whole lot easier than going from level 4 to level 5, because what you see in level 5 is the long tail of very few have implemented all the all the characteristics that we're measuring. And what we can do with that data, because we've got that across lots of companies, we can compare one company, company A, and company A was actually, I think it was just in level 4 when we averaged it over all the different best practices and categories. And so we said, okay, let's just look at one or two, and I've got another example coming up. Let's look at one or two of the characteristics and see and look at the generic answers in level 4 and see how that compares to company A. And in this case, they had plans to hire specialists in industrial analytics, but they hadn't implemented enterprise quality, and they felt that their effective management of safety and risks was low. So we can help them to actually look at specific areas, because they you know, if their characteristics where they're behind their peer group are bundled in a particular area, and we'll see the areas in a minute, that can be very helpful for them to decide what they should do next in terms of making the improvements they need to move forward in analytics and transformation. Another example here is a company that was actually level 2. So it really hadn't got gone along the path very far in terms of sophistication of technologies and processes and people in their organization. And in fact, when we compared company A against the level 2 peer group, there were a lot of areas where level 2 had implemented and company A had not. They have a long way to go. They recognize it, and you know, these are done by the company, not by LNS. We analyze the data, of course, but you know, a company that's in early stages of transformation and recognizes that is better than a company that has got no clue. And in order to make it more useful, I just mentioned with company, they were both company A's, of course. Sorry about that. They weren't the same company. We split it into people, process, and technology characteristics, and inside each one of those into 3. So inside people, it's leadership, culture, and competency. And we often see a bundling together. As I said, you know, there are areas, some companies that really haven't got good leadership, and so, you know, the culture is also probably a bit weak. Whereas in certain areas, and it also depends who answers our survey. We very much recognize that. Sometimes it's very, you know, focused towards strength in technology and less in people. But when we go in to do a maturity check of something different from analytics that matter, then it may change. So there's, we're not trying to beat the consulting companies here. We're not trying to do a 6-month consulting project. We're trying to help people have a quick look when they become clients of LNS, have a quick look at where they are from their own viewpoint. You know, yes, we know we have these and these things we need to do. But let's see how our market maturity for analytics, for asset performance is, for quality is, and see if that can help us persuade the right people to go in the right direction. So I've left just about 5 minutes to say what you should do tomorrow. When you take away and consider when you return to the office, or should I say the spare room or whatever passes for an office today. These are just a couple of things that I added at the end to say, you know, what to do. There's a lot to do. And I think the first one is, if you haven't got industrial transformation and analytics leaders, identify them. Now's a great time for them to learn what they need to do in their job. The people are looking to challenge themselves during COVID. People who are sat at home not being able to really do their job as well as they did in the past. And there's loads of things you can do to improve your industrial transformation and your leadership. And with that, I'll thank you all very much for listening to the end, which is great. And I'll pass it back to Diane for questions.
Andrew, we had a question on what is EQMS?
Oh, easy. Enterprise Quality Management System. So that's if you take your quality beyond the sort of plant level and you build a corporate quality.
Okay, great. We had another question earlier on about what about manufacturing supply chain strategy architecture before the operational architecture?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that they're so intertwined that you know you need to work together. When you look at supply chain, a lot of companies' supply chain is to their immediate suppliers and their immediate customers. If you look at the world of industrial transformation and companies that really are getting it, they're starting to expand out into a much longer supply chain. And I think that one of the things that can really fundamentally change your supply chain is also this idea of trust that I was talking about in IT/OT convergence. There's also supplier customer convergence, which we very rarely talk about. And I think that there's a lot in supply chain management and a lot in supply chain architecture that can help us to get away from the world of supply chain conflict and get towards the world of supply chain trust and partnership.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot. There's certainly a lot of companies that are engaging in, let's say, supply chain integration or introducing new apps that can engage with their customers more directly to build the quote unquote product of one. Ultimately, though, you know, you may use analytics to drive supply chain initiatives, and invariably you're going to find out that whether you are a brand management company and you're contracting out your manufacturing, or if you are a manufacturer at heart and you have operations level manufacturing, sites, their ability to respond to that supply chain is going to be equally important. So eventually you're going to engage with the OT IT technology bridge as well to bring that into the analytics realm if you've started on the supply chain side or at the enterprise level first.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I believe we also had a hand raised. I believe Didier. Not sure.
Didier?
Didier. We may have lost the question. Okay. We also had something on asking about the models. Pull that one up for you. So there was a question saying that, or a comment really, that models are usually built according to the time from cause to effect. But this person was suggesting that the models need to be inversed. They are from result to the cause. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that cause and effect is something that people use because it's easy to understand. You can easily see the effect and doing the inverse is very, very hard.
I would think that many teams start with cause and effect first, and as they transform from in that 4 or now 5-step analytics maturity model to become more predictive and more prognostic, they then have reliance and confidence in their data, confidence in their modeling, confidence in the model's inputs and outputs. Now they can use that model effectively to drive predictive solutions based on what if scenarios, capacity constraints, other things that they can do and model. So you kind of, as you mature in analytics, you may start at cause and effect. You end up reversing those models or using those models in reverse. I don't know if you can always start that way. That might be an interesting challenge. Of course, one of the things to consider is that as more and more manufacturers are crossing this chasm, if you will, and publishing their results, we as an entire industry will reap the benefit of that and be able to start off our analytics journeys farther down the road. So maybe we can take existing models, existing best practices, and rather than infantilely start with cause and effect, jump right into a known model and say, how does this apply to my supply chain and my OT technologies and my capacities, and get results right off the bat by reversing that concept of asking what is the effect I want, and then what are the causal and the actions I need to take in order to drive that.
Yeah, and I think we're barely scratching the surface today. When you look at the analytics that are being used in manufacturing processes today, whether it be from the boardroom or down to the sensor, there's a lot of levels of sophistication still to go, and that will help to move the idea that you can go from the result to the cause, through sophisticated solutions.
We probably have time for one quick question, and then any that we didn't get to, we can certainly respond to afterwards. But this question is, where do analytics and data management architecture fit into the business plant through MES systems, SCADA?
I think that it depends on where you are along the journey. Things like MES and SCADA are very, very useful sources of raw data and somewhat organized data, because the MES systems might do its own aggregation. And we're seeing a lot of less sophisticated companies who want to make a start, who don't already have MES, saying, that can be a very good starting point for me to build a solution around MES, and then to build my enterprise data model on top of that, so to avoid having to do them at the same time, to try to take all the raw data out of your plant into your data lake or your data model, when you've already got a lot of that in the MES system. So I think I've slightly changed my view in this over the years. I think that I'm now much more inclined to think that MES and SCADA are SCADA to a slightly lesser extent, because it's closer to the plant, and you don't want to be playing with that too much at the business level. But certainly with MES, it's a good starting point for what's a very complex journey for a lot of companies. And if you don't have automation, and if you don't have MES, and you don't have sophisticated enterprise-wide supply chain and ERP, you've got a long way to go. And MES can be a very good starting point.
There is a that there's I guess one of the ways you can take that question is that I do believe, I believe, in what I've seen is good practice, is that the analytics tools are, because of their technology, and also because of the breadth of data that they take in, the platforms they need to run on, and the audiences that need to consume that data. From the slide earlier that Andrew showed with the platform and all the different yellow pointers into the different data users or consumers of that data, they are typically separate systems. That's the first thing, is that we should think of them to some extent as separate systems. But an interesting point that Andrew makes is that even if you're working on analytics and you're doing data analysis and you're coming up with conclusions, you can't effectively control outcomes unless you have the infrastructure and the software tools in place in order to actually affect that change and govern that change. The manufacturing execution system, think of it as almost like the operating system of the plant, or the OT operating system. I mean, that's one of the key pieces of technology that allow you to keep control and change behaviors, change outcomes based on analytics results and what the prescriptive analytics is ultimately telling you to do in your OT environment. So they go hand in hand, and you can kind of work on one set of solutions, but before you know it, you really need the other foundational set of solutions at the plant level, the MES, the SCADA, those technologies as well, in order to realize the true nature of an analytics program and its results.
Great.
Yeah, we can take that last question.
You're good. Okay. Oren Yolovich had their hand up. Oren. Okay, I did post in chat for anybody who did not get their question answered, or if you have remaining questions, you can just email those to me. So I gave you my email address, and we want to make sure that you get answers to your questions. So thank you.
And for those of you who attended, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. As Andrew said, it's valuable time. and a lot of us are remote right now, so definitely appreciate it. I hope it was informative, and there's plenty to follow. And they put a link in here in the chat, I think, as well, as where you can download the book. So you can obviously get the full story and see all the insight that Andrew and the team at LNS put together for us.
Thank you. And bye-bye.